chairperson had a paper to lay, and I'm not seeing him in the House. Is there a member of the committee who's been mandated to do that? Yes, Senator Wamatinga.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the Senate today, Tuesday, 21st March 2023. Report of the Standing Committee on Land, Environment and Natural Resources on its consideration on the Natural Resources Benefit Sharing Bill, Senate Bill number 6 of 2022.
Next order, clerk.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the Senate today, Tuesday, 21st March 2023, the fifth report of the Procedure and Rules Committee on the review of the Senate standing orders. I beg to lay.
Next order.
Order number 6, notices of motion.
Senator James Morango.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice of the following motion that aware that the Constitution of Kenya acknowledges the nation's respect for the environment and obligates the state to eliminate processes and activities that are likely to endanger it. Further, aware that there has been an extensive cultivation of eucalyptus trees in Kenya owing to the rapid growth, high biomass yield, and adaptability to a wide range of climatic regimes and soil conditions. Concerned that eucalyptus trees require high amount of water through their growth, have deep root system that extract water from the soil at a rapid rate, and their cultivation on riparian land depletes the water in the riparian ecosystem, often resulting in the drying up of streams, aggravating the effect of climate change, particularly in the infrequent and insufficient rainfall currently being experienced in the country. Now, therefore, the Senate urges the Minister of Environment, Climate Change and Forestry in coordination with the National Environment Management Authority to 1, develop and implement a policy framework to guide the cultivation of eucalyptus trees with the aim of mitigating the adverse effect on the environment, and 2, undertake a systematic nationwide removal program for eucalyptus tree cultivations on riparian lands. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Wamatinga.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir. I rise to make a statement. I beg to give a statement on the following motion. That aware that water is essential, yet scarce resources.
Senator Wamatinga, you are giving notice.
Notice.
Yes. So proceed to give the notice.
Yes, I beg to give notice of the following motion. That aware that water is an essential yet scarce resource whose demand is increasing rapidly due to population growth, urbanization, and industrialization, and whose wastage has become an issue that needs to be addressed urgently owing to Kenya's vulnerability to climate change. Noting that there is growth in the number of buildings coming up to accommodate the rapidly growing population, thereby exposing a challenge to water management. Appreciating that the incorporation of water management system in the building plans include a variety of techniques and technologies such as rainwater harvesting, wastewater recycling, low flow plumbing, sensor systems, and detect leaks, deactivate or activate water flow when necessary, thereby optimizing the use of water by eliminating water overexploitation, wastewater management, and pollution. And now, therefore, the Senate urges the Ministry of Lands, Public Works, Housing and Urban Development, in coordination with the Councils of Governors and the National Environmental and Management Authority, to 1, incorporate in the building code and standards a requirement for intelligent water management systems in all the buildings, and to undertake a systematic nationwide renovation to government-owned buildings to incorporate water management systems. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You had 2 notices to give. Proceed on with the second.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I beg to give notice of the following motion. That aware that the high unemployment rate in Kenya has pushed many Kenyans to seek loans from SACCOs, microfinance institutions, and banks to start small and medium enterprises as a means to sustain their livelihoods, noting that the youth in particular have invested in movable assets including vehicles and motorcycles to start business in the transport industry, and most of them have signed up to the ride-hailing apps, including but not limited to Uber, Taxify, Bolt, and Little Cab, cognizant that the Banking Act of 2015, Cap 488, does not provide for negotiation on their own repayment agreement whenever the business environment becomes unfavorable as a result of the high cost of living, lowered earnings from the app providers, and high interest rates. And now, therefore, the Senate urges the National Treasury and Economic Planning to come up with a policy framework to review the Banking Act in order to renegotiate the payment terms of the loans and provide cushions for Kenyans with non-performing loans and prevent the loss of their movable assets. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Next order, clerk. Senator Sige, you had a notice to give on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I give notice of the following adoption of the 5th report of the Procedure and Rules Committee on the review of the standing orders of the Senate, that pursuant to standing orders number 269 and 270, the Senate approves the 5th report of the Procedure and Rules Committee on periodic amendment to the standing orders of the Senate, laid on the table of the Senate on Tuesday, 21st March 2023, and pursuant to the provisions of Article 124, Sub-Article 1 of the Constitution, and Standing Order 270 and 272, 1. Resolves to amend its standing orders as contained in Appendix 2 to the report, and 2. Orders that the amendments to the standing orders as contained in Appendix 1 to the report come into effect on the 11th of April 2023. I move.
Honorable Senators and Clerk, make sure that every senator gets a copy of that report so that when debate ensues, at least all senators are informed and are aware of the kind of amendments of the standing orders that are contained in that report. Next order, please.
Order number 7, statements.
The Honorable Chirange. That is deferred. The Honorable Mutu. Honorable members, the statements hour starts at 3:14. It will end at exactly 4:14. Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to request for a statement on the status of the last mile project in Murang'a County. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to a standing order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Energy on the status of the last mile project in Murang'a County. In the statement, the committee should, 1, provide a status report on the last mile project in Murang'a County, outlining measures in place to revive and complete stalled projects. 2, state why the prepaid meters supplied to residents have accumulated unpaid electricity bills. 3, state measures, if any, put in place to ensure residents with electricity connection acquire meter numbers promptly. And 4, outline the interventions and long-term plans put in place to ensure electricity connectivity to all residents of Murang'a. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Gloria.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to comment on Senator Nyutu's statement. But before I do that, I've noticed that we have a delegation from Kisii County. I'd like to welcome them to this house. This is the upper house. And feel at home because you're well represented. We have 3 senators from Kisii County, and we welcome you to the upper house. Karibu. Mr. Speaker, on the issue of the KPLC meters, I want to highlight that there is actually a bigger issue than what is being raised in Senator Nyutu's statement in terms of availability of the actual meters. There is actually a whole cartel there. I know of many businessmen who have applied to get the meters, and they were promised, even in the guise of pending projects, some under the last mile. It might not be in Senator Nyutu's county, but I want to say that whatever is happening there at KPLC, Mr. Speaker, it needs to be investigated. We have clients who have paid upfront huge amounts of money to ensure that they get the meters. But it has been a story after the next for so long, some of them up to a year. And then what they're doing is that they're using that loophole to ensure that they overbill some of these clients. So even as they're looking as on this particular county for Senator Nyutu, I think in general, Mr. Speaker, KPLC has to really be transparent when it comes to the application of meters and how long that process should take, because clients are suffering. There are many commercial entities that would like to be, taken out of the postpaid meters, but they are just on the queue to get those meters. So, Mr. Speaker, I beg to support the statement on Senator Nyutu.
Senator Mwaruma.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Allow me to ride on the statement by Senator Nyutu about last mile connectivity. I think if we get that information for his county, it is proper that we also get that information for the rest of the counties in Kenya, because it's a very critical thing. We have followed through with Kenya Power and Lighting and the Ministry of Energy to have our counties connected to the main grid. But the problem is that Kenya Power and Lighting has become very unresponsive. There are many applications that we've made where we have meters that have not been optimized. We have not meters, but transformers. There are transformers that are working, but they are supplying electricity to very few people, yet there are so many people within the radius of 600 meters that have not been supplied with electricity. We followed through, and we need to get responses from Kenya Power and Lighting and the Ministry of Energy when transformer maximization would be undertaken, Mr. Speaker. So I would want to ride on the statement. It's a very good statement about connectivity, and I would want to know how or when Kenya Power and Lighting would connect all our people to the grid. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Kisang.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Speaker. I wish to comment on the statement by Honorable Nyutu. Honorable Speaker, the last mile connectivity was a very novel program that was started by the last regime to connect all public institutions and also villages. It's unfortunate that about 2 or 3 phases, phase 1, phase 2, and even phase 3 of World Bank funded projects collapsed. Some of them stalled along the way. So this statement has come out timely, and we need to ensure Kenya Power give us a status report of all the counties in terms of last mile connectivity, and those counties that are still way below maybe 50%, we do an affirmative action. If possible, our colleagues in National Assembly, they allocate resources so that we ensure counties are given affirmative action. There are counties, Honorable Speaker, that generate power, but they don't have power within the community. You go to Marsabit, you go to Turkana, and the northern part of the country. Some have been in darkness for long, and they are using thermal, and they have solar power across the country. Honorable Speaker, it is important that to achieve the developed economy and we become a middle income economy, we need power. But we cannot achieve if some of the counties, some of the constituencies in the country are still below 10%. So, Honorable Speaker, this is a good move, and we need to push to ensure that our people get power.
Senator Beatrice Kenya.
Honorable Speaker, I would also like to add my voice to the statement that has been given by the Honorable Senator, Senator Ruto. Honorable Speaker, the story of the last mile in this country could be one of the worst rip-offs we've had amongst the major projects that we've had as a country. Honorable Speaker, this project was implemented by the former REA, now REREC, in consultation with the Kenya Power. The project was so noble that each village in this country expected that at the end of the project, each village was going to be connected to electricity. Honorable Speaker, only for the implementers of this project to drop this project in each school, in each public facility, a transformer, a mileage of a transformer was constructed. But Honorable Speaker, you go around the country, you'll find that in most of the primary schools, that the transformers were taken to, either the transformers are not operational, because, Honorable Speaker, a major component of the transformer was never fixed. So you'd ideally, if you are to take an inventory, have transformers, have power lines into these schools, into these public facilities like hostels, like polytechnics, village polytechnics in the village. And you find, Honorable Speaker, that our people were very hopeful. And to our amusement, Honorable Speaker, a number of these projects on transformers have never been energized. If you ask Kenya Power in the regional offices or in the county offices, that is the business managers, you'll be told a component of the transformer was left out. Honorable Speaker, if Honorable Ruto has asked for a status report of his country, it can only be prudent that we ask of that report of the whole county so that Kenyans can benefit from that last mile project, Honorable Speaker. It only leaves us with the conclusion, Honorable Speaker, that this was a scandal itself. Because you ask yourself, Honorable Speaker, why as a country we'd have transformers taken to schools but are not energized. Most of the schools are always running to Kenya Power every other week, spending public funds in the effort of looking for how these transformers but can be energized. But if you went to the root cause, you'd find that parts of the transformers were never fixed, Honorable Speaker. And this could be the reason why the noble project that was proposed by the former regime, the school laptop project, did not take place. Honorable Speaker, I support.
Thank you. Senator Kenywa.
Asante Bwana Spika, na simama kuunga mkono taarifa iliyoletwa na Senator Nyuto kutoka Murang'a. Bwana Spika, mambo ya nguvu za umeme imekuwa ni hali ya sintofahamu katika nchi yetu. Bwana Spika, si Murang'a peke yake. Ukitembea sehemu nyingi unapata ya kwamba hasa Laikipia unapata ya kwamba transformer ambazo tumepewa zinasambaza nguvu za umeme kwa mtu mmoja Bwana Spika, na ilhali katika sehemu yenyewe ina watu wengi ambao wanakaa pale bila stima. Na vile kwa Kiingereza wanasema ati ni last mile Bwana Spika, sisi kwetu Laikipia hatuna tabasamu yoyote kwa sababu stima yenyewe hakuna. Tunaishi katika giza Bwana Spika. Kwa hivyo vile ambavyo tungetaka ni taarifa hii taarifa hii ambayo inaletwa wasiangazie Murang'a peke yake Bwana Spika, waangazie hata Laikipia, kwa sababu Bwana Spika, transformer ambazo zingine zinaletwa ni transformer gushi Bwana Spika. Wakati kama huu kunanyesha, kukiwa na radi Bwana Spika, ama kukuwe na umeme umetokea mara moja, unapata stima zimepotea, alafu bidhaa ambazo ziko katika nyumba zimeharibika Bwana Spika. Kwa hivyo shirika la nguvu za umeme inapaswa waangazie haya mambo, wanapoulizwa haya maswali waseme ni transformer ngapi ambazo wamepeana huko Laikipia. Bwana Spika, ni watu wangapi ambao wamepewa stima Bwana Spika? Na si hiyo peke yake Bwana Spika. Ukiangalia bei ya nguvu ya umeme Bwana Spika imepanda sana Bwana Spika. Wanakuambia kwamba shida iliyoko ni kwa sababu hakunyeshi Bwana Spika. Lakini kukinyesha mara moja Bwana Spika, stima tena inapotea. Unashindwa ni shida gani iliyoko. Wakati wa kiangazi unaambiwa hakuna maji. Kukinyesha unaambiwa tena maji imekuwa mengi, stima hatupati. Kwa hivyo Bwana Spika, sisi tungetaka tuambiwe ni watu wangapi ambao wamepewa umeme kwetu Laikipia Bwana Spika. Kitu kingine ni watu wangapi ambao wanapanga kupeana nguvu za umeme wakati huu wanaposema ni tabasamu, na siwe ni tabasamu ya mwisho Bwana Spika. Kwa hivyo hayo mambo yaangaziwe ndio iweze kuongeza uchumi, kwa sababu wakati huu uchumi umeharibika Bwana Spika. Tukipata nguvu za umeme tunaweza kufanya kazi masaa 28 Bwana Spika. Na Bwana Spika, nikitaja tu kwa sababu ndugu yangu alitaja na ni vizuri niseme, senator wa kutoka Homa Bay alisema ya kwamba masomo si ya manufaa hapa katika Senate. Bwana Spika, si vizuri yeye mwenyewe kuwa anaongea na wanafunzi wa chuo kikuu na kuambia wakati ambapo wanasema mambo ya masomo.
Can you restrict yourself to the statement? Just restrict yourself to the statement.
Bwana Spika, nilitaka kusema kwa sababu tayari imeandikwa katika daftari zetu Bwana Spika, wakati badala ya sisi kuwapongeza wanafunzi, ikiwa sisi tutakuja kuwakosoa, kuambia wale wanasoma na kuambia wavuvi na kuambia hata wafugaji ni wa manufaa zaidi kushinda wanafunzi, Bwana Spika, hii inakaa badala ya kuwapa motisha Bwana Spika anawadharau na kuonyesha masomo si ya manufaa. Bwana Spika, sisi tuko hapa ni wasomi, ni werendi wa masomo. Asante Bwana Spika.
Senator Kavindu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to support the statement by Senator Nyuto, the senator from Murang'a. Mr. Speaker, this issue should be covered for the whole county, because the whole country, because I don't think there is anywhere where anyone can stand and say they have enough electricity. When I talk of Machakos County, Mr. Speaker, where even Kenya Power draws most of their electricity from Masinga Dam, the surrounding Masinga Dam homes have no electricity. So, Mr. Speaker, I stand to support, and I say this should be done for the whole country, not only for Murang'a County. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support.
Senator Chirange.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want from the onset to support the statement by Senator Nyuto of Murang'a. I think this statement is timely, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the issue of energy and cost of energy in the country is very critical. We cannot discuss about ease of doing business without reliable, cheap, and affordable power supply in the country, Mr. Speaker. one of the serious agendas it should be considered is provision of last mile connectivity to most of our villages, Mr. Speaker. Whenever you walk around for us in counties and even your constituencies, Mr. Speaker, the question that wananchi will always ask you is that tunataka stima, hatuna stima. So it's always the biggest challenge, Mr. Speaker, that continues to bedevil the country. And Mr. Speaker, for us farmers, we need this energy and power to be reliable so that we can be able, you know, the cost of animal feeds is very expensive, so that we can be able to do it on our own, to be able to process animal feeds, increase the productivity of milk, Mr. Speaker, and even meat in the market, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I was shocked the other day that Kenya Power is telling us they don't have meters that can be used to install to houses. And I've asked that question for now like 6 months. And yet most people who are supposed to get electricity for the last 7 to 8 months, Mr. Speaker, they are being told there are no meters by Kenya Power and Lighting Company, Mr. Speaker. There is a big problem because if it is about the supply, Mr. Speaker, the longer delay that an ordinary mwananchi should wait for a meter or even connectivity of electricity, Mr. Speaker, should be at least a month or 3 weeks, Mr. Speaker, so that we are talking about efficiency, we are talking about effectiveness, we are talking about supply of last mile connectivity to many households, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and therefore, even in Nandi, we are not doing very well because the connectivity is still very low. For example, I was in a village over the weekend on Saturday, a village called Chebiewet in Masab sub-county. They have never seen electricity. You go to some parts of Tindred, some parts of Aldai, Mr. Speaker, and therefore it shows you there is still a big challenge, Mr. Speaker, because the energy will always assist us to produce more, the energy that is reliable. And I agree with sentiments that our colleagues have mentioned. When it is dry season, Kenya Power tells us electricity cannot be generated because there is low volume of water. But when it rains again, Mr. Speaker, the power disappears. So we don't know the relationship between the power lighting during rainy season and the rain. Because we want the rains, there is unreliability of blackouts across the country. And you remember, Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, a few days ago, there was a national outage of power blackout. Before we are being told that some monkeys were interfering with transformers somewhere, or they were interfering, they have been touching some connections, Mr. Speaker. There are many Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, that lost their lives. I think like Machakos Hospital, they were even Mombasa, Mr. Speaker. People were depending on critical care unit by the supply of power in our hospitals. There are many Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, who lost their things in fridges, Mr. Speaker. There are drugs that are kept in fridges. And even there are many more Kenyans who their food went bad, Mr. Speaker. And you know, it is very unfortunate. And therefore, Kenya Power must be careful in future to ensure when there is national outage of power, they inform the country in advance so that we don't run into losses, so that we don't risk losses of life or even affect the level of economy, Mr. Speaker. So I think going into the future, we don't want to see a repeat, because in the past, Mr. Speaker, during the last regime, they used to create national power outage for political reasons. But now the freedom is here, and therefore there should be reliability of power everywhere, Mr. Speaker. Even I can see Senator Kavindu is smiling. Even when they are doing Maandamanos, no one can switch the power for them, Mr. Speaker. So we need to move forward as a country, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
To the next request for statement, I have this communication to make. I would like to acknowledge in the presence in the public gallery this afternoon, a visiting delegation from Riara Group of Schools in Nairobi County. The delegation comprises 5 teachers and 56 pupils who are in the Senate for a one-day study visit. Honorable Senators, in our usual tradition of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to them, and on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit. I will allow Senator Karen Nyamu to make very brief welcoming remarks to welcome the visiting delegation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to extend a word of welcome to the teachers and pupils of Riera Group of Schools. As you can see, these are the senators in this country representing the 47 counties across the country. And here we are charged to oversight devolution and make sure that the counties and the county governments are working according to the Constitution. I want to encourage you, students and pupils, to work very hard in school and to be focused and to ignore the distractions that come with being young and being in school, and dream big, and you can achieve your dreams and you can achieve anything you put your mind to. And we welcome you very much to this session of Senate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Johannes Mwaruma.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to go through two statements. The first statement, Mr. Speaker, is on terms of service for community scouts engaged by the Kenya Wildlife Service, KWS. Mr. Speaker, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Lands, Environment and Natural Resources regarding the terms and conditions of service for the 5,500 community scouts engaged by the Kenya Wildlife Service to assist in wildlife conservation efforts as part of the national government's post-COVID-19 economic stimulus program. In the statement, the committee should, 1, outline the terms and conditions of service for the community scouts and state when the term of the current ones will come to an end. 2, state the source of funding for the program and the amount of money that has been expended so far, giving details of the program's annual budget. And 3, clarify whether there are any plans by the Ministry of Tourism, Wildlife and Heritage to conduct more recruitment of community scouts in the near future, and if so, state the number of scouts to be recruited and provide the indicative budget thereof. The second statement, Mr. Speaker, is on the status of Bura, Mgange, Weruga, Undanyi, Mbale, Mtomogoti, and Chala Njukini illicit roads. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Roads, Transportation and Housing concerning the status of these two roads. The first road, Mr. Speaker, is a road from Bura, Mgange, Weruga, Undanyi, Mtomogoti, and Chala Njukini illicit, both of them in Taita Taveta County. In the statement, the committee should, 1, explain the reasons leading to the disbandment of camp by the contractor of the Bura, Mgange, Weruga, Undanyi, Mbale, Mtomogoti road. 2, provide a report on the status of the Chala Njukini illicit road. 3, state the measures put in place by the government, if any, to ensure the two projects are undertaken to conclusion. And finally, Mr. Speaker, 4, provide the total cost of both projects, stating the amounts expended so far and the expected dates of resumption and completion of the two projects. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for this opportunity to make a brief comment on the first statement by the Senator for Taita Taveta, Senator Mwaruma. Honorable Speaker, since 2016, there is no on-ref rangers which have been recruited in this country since the year 2016. And this is a matter of fact, Honorable Speaker, because I've been following the on-ref menace in my county, and when I talk to the KWS officers and the bosses in the county, they told me the challenge they have is lack of enough personnel. So we have 7 years without recruitment, and then they came and recruited the 5,500 community scouts. Now to my dismay, Honorable Speaker, these scouts have been stopped working, and then they are trying to see whether they can recruit new rangers. So to me, there is completely no rationale of going to recruit where we have already 5,500 well-experienced scouts who have been in the system, and now they are being sent home. Honorable Speaker, human wildlife conflict is on the rise in this country. The whole of Taita Taveta, Kitui, run to Meru, all the way to Isiolo, like elephants on the roofs. Like in Meru, I think we have an invasion of more than 600 elephants, which are really harassing farmers on our farms. So, Mr. Speaker, to me, this is a very, very important statement, which should be handled with the fastest time possible. And as the chair of Railson, I also want to advise the chairs of several committees that there are so many statements lying and people are suffering out there. So if also statements can be prioritized by our chairs, then also Kenyans can get support from the government with the timeliness that it deserves. So we will be encouraging them even in our meetings that 2 or 3 weeks shouldn't be enough to expedite with the statement, so that such a statement can be dispensed of, so that these scouts can be even sent back to where they have been working before the recruitment of rangers. But I don't know whether the best thing is to have these rangers continue working to be recruited as kind of race rangers, instead of now getting fresh and taking them to Manyani and all this time, Mr. Speaker. So I want to support this statement. And I'm happy Senator Jones Marume brought it. It was actually on my target, but I'm happy you brought it and you get my support. Even when the statement will be answered by the respective committee, kindly notify me so that we can really handle this business properly. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also arise to support the statement by the Senator Taita Taveta on the issue of the 5,500 community scouts engaged by the Kenya Wild Service, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this was an affirmative action that time, arising from the effects of the COVID. And I think it really helped our young people to access employment that time. Mr. Speaker, what is not clear is the conditions and terms of service. And Mr. Speaker, it is important that we consider these young people, instead of, Mr. Speaker, terminating their services and going for new, it is only fair that we continue to have the 5,500, perhaps increase more. Mr. Speaker, it is true, my committee went to Kitui. There's a big problem in Kitui between the Somali community and the Kamba community, arising from pasture and so on. And Mr. Speaker, the game reserves around that region have a problem of they don't have personnel to help. And so, Mr. Speaker, I think we need more, not just the 5,500. In a place like Baringo North, Kapnora Game Reserve, again, there's a lot of conflict. And also because we don't have enough, rangers to safeguard and to protect the people living in that area, to avoid the war with the elephants and so on. Mr. Speaker, apart from these community scouts, we have a number of other programs, Mr. Speaker. For example, the WASEs, those who are helping the chiefs in community, Mr. Speaker. you know, and we even have the NPRC in areas of insecurity. There is no clear conditions in terms of service for these particular groups, Mr. Speaker, and they do a lot of good work in helping the national government in maintaining peace and order in those areas. I think it is important, Mr. Speaker, even as we deal with the issue of the scouts, that there is need to look at all this. We need a policy to know how to help and to ensure that there is clear conditions and terms and conditions of service for this kind of people. Because sometimes, Mr. Speaker, we just take them and we don't bother to know if they're helping. Mr. Speaker, in Baringo, for example, in 2 constituencies, that is Baringo North and Baringo South, we have a number of our young people who are helping the police, the so-called National Police Reservists. Mr. Speaker, they do a lot in helping the police. But, Mr. Speaker, sometimes they are given 5,000 in a month. Another month, they are not receiving anything. And so, Mr. Speaker, they are not even clear and sure as to what their families will have. And yet, Mr. Speaker, we are using their services. I want to propose, Mr. Speaker, that as my colleague prosecutes this particular statement, it is important as a committee to look at this as a policy so that we have some of these taken into account and ensure that those who engage are able to benefit and have clear terms of service in their lives and they are able to serve the country. I support, Mr. Speaker.
We'll move to the next request. That is by Senator Seki.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Devolution on Intergovernmental Relations regarding the implementation of the second level of devolution through decentralization service in urban areas. In the committee should give reasons for the lack of separations of duties and management differentiation between other county organs and municipal jurisdiction as envisaged by Section 48(2), 49, 104, 3, and 101 of the County Government Act. Mr. Speaker, the committee should, too, provide a countrywide report on the annual budget allocation to municipalities since the inception of the entities in 2018. The specific references to funds drawn from the national government, bilateral linkages, and county governments, including all audited reports for the past 4 years of municipal operationalization under the Urban Areas and Cities Act. State the steps that have been taken by both levels of government toward achieving the full implementation of Kenya Urban Support Program and capacity enhancement from the State Department of Housing and Urban Development. Explain why municipalities have not achieved financial autonomy as anticipated by Public Finance Management Act, despite the clarity of the Article 184, 1B of the Constitution, Section 155 of the PFM Act, Section 48(2 of the County Government Act, Section 148 of the PFM, Section 12, 14, 20, and 21 of Urban Support Program, and outline the intervention required to allow county assemblies to appropriate resources to urban entities as distinct vote heads and disbursement through direct transfer to the urban entities, as well as other funds relating to the Kenya Urban Support Program and related partnership. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Thank you. I did not want to interrupt the senator requesting for the statement. Senator Abbas, you're out of order. You are not under standing orders allowed to come in between the chair and the senator speaking. So kindly refer to Standing Order 1172 so that you get to know exactly how to. Senator Mungatana.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to make my intervention in this matter. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the statement by the Honorable Seki. Mr. Speaker, the plight of municipalities which have been set up by county governments is a real serious issue across the country. In my county, Mr. Speaker, the whole municipality was set up with a lot of pomp and pageantry. But, Mr. Speaker, there is absolutely no budget for development. So what people are doing is just collecting salaries and not being able to implement any meaningful development agenda of their own. In fact, if this urban support program was not there, they would be just sitting and collecting salaries. Mr. Speaker, in the whole municipality in Tana River County, the former manager, a gentleman of very high standing, had to just leave and resign in protest because he could not imagine a situation where he's collecting money and there's nothing to deliver because they are not supported properly by the county governments. So, Mr. Speaker, I would urge the committee relevant that is investigating this matter, Mr. Speaker, to look at what can be set aside in terms of ring fencing some funds for deliberate development of these municipalities. Otherwise, Mr. Speaker, they will just be a drain on funds and there will be nothing tangible coming out of them. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Kajua.
Mr. Speaker, this is a very heavy and a very important statement request. And I want to encourage the chair of the Revolution Committee to not just deal with it as a statement. This is a matter that is ripe for an inquiry on its own. Mr. Speaker, I've had the privilege of chairing the Devolution Committee in the last session. And there is need for this House to do a legislative impact assessment on some of the laws that govern devolution. The Urban Areas and Cities Act, the County Governments Act, and the Public Finance Management Act. Many of these statutes were formulated at a time when we still did not understand how devolution was working. The County Governments Act, for example, and even the Urban Areas and Cities Act, Mr. Speaker. And 10 years down the line, you'll realize that some counties have done experiments and others are still not yielding to the principle of subsidiarity that is in the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, there are some governors that have created towns and municipalities, but it is only on paper. You only have a charter conferring a town or conferring some center the town or municipal status, and yet there are no services to correspond to that. Mr. Speaker, I have seen that the senator has asked for a linkage between the plans and audited reports. The Urban Areas and Cities Act and the County Governments Act, and if you read it also the PFM Act, require the county assembly to be the one to consider the audited reports of municipalities. Now the question is, should those audited reports come to the Senate? And if they came to the Senate, would we have the capacity to process reports for all municipalities and towns? Probably not, Mr. Speaker. And so there are a lot of gaps in those pieces of legislation, and I hope that this statement request will not be responded to in the usual manner where the CS is called, the senator asking for the statement is called, and then that's the end. I want to encourage the very able chair of devolution that this is the opportunity we have for us to review the Urban Areas and Cities Act and confirm that it is fit for purpose to support devolution for the next 20 years. Mr. Speaker, when this subject is being discussed, I urge the chair of devolution to invite me as chair emeritus so that I can also learn and I can also share my experiences chairing that committee in the last session.
Senator Abbas.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, actually, as Honorable Kajwang said, this is a very weighty matter. And as you're aware, the county or devolutions still have teething problems. And I've been seeing, most of the governors are still creating more municipalities and urban centers. However, budgetary allocation has not been always done. And therefore, now that I know also there's a bill coming, maybe in the course of the next 2 days, on boundary issues, the Commission for Boundaries, so that we could be able to sort out this problem of teething problems of boundaries and the cities and urban centers, all these things. I therefore, as a committee, the chair of the Standing Committee of Devolution, we take note, and I think this will be taken seriously, and we will make a report to this House with all due respect, Mr. Speaker, sir. And therefore, we will follow up the issues as they said. I know there are many municipalities actually that are under the governor's authorities that have been made. The governors have managed them, and I know there are a lot of resources being collected, and it is not allowed back to the municipalities. There are a lot of issues in the municipalities in terms of development, in terms of sanitations and all these things. So I think this will be appropriately have a bill of its own. Thank you, sir.
We move to the next request, Senator Chirange. We move to the next statement, the request for the next statement. Yes, what is your intervention, Senator Veronica?
Mr. Speaker, I had an intention to rise and support this very weighty statement sought by Senator Seki because devolved governance is the core promise of the Constitution in Kenya, Mr. Speaker, and over 80% of Kenyans support.
I will allow you 2 minutes, and then we move to the request by Senator Chirange. We have up to 3:15 to conclude on statements.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
If you look at the order paper, we have 2 more.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate that indulgence. Mr. Speaker, as I was saying, devolved governance is the core promise of the Constitution of Kenya. And over 80% of Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, support devolution. Kenyans also have confidence and legitimate expectation from county governments that services will be rendered to all citizens in Kenya. The only way an effective government can achieve this objective, Mr. Speaker, is through an enhanced and a properly capacity build county government in every location within the 47 counties, Mr. Speaker. And national government has to work in very close tandem with the county governments in national budgeting processes to ensure that development is supported at the county level, Mr. Speaker. So I take this opportunity to support the statement by Honorable Seki and say that the committee must return a report, which should almost be an audit, to show how development fund is being devolved effectively to the counties in order for Wananchi to be able to benefit from devolution. Counties have lately been lacking in funds to support critical functions that they are supposed to perform, including within the health sector, education sector, electricity, and other amenities that are needed within the county governments, Mr. Speaker. So I support that statement sought by Honorable Seki.
Yes, Senator Chirange, proceed to request for your statement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the intelligence. Request for statement on the state of foreign direct investments in the country or in Kenya. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Trade, Industrialization and Tourism on the state of foreign direct investment, FDI, in Kenya. In the statement, the committee should, 1, explain the state of current foreign direct investments, FDI, to Kenya in terms of business and capital investments, detailing how it compares to previous years. Number 2, Mr. Speaker, elucidate on the policy interventions put in place by the Ministry of Trade, Investment and Industry, if any, to safeguard the legitimate rights and interests of both domestic and foreign investors in the country. Mr. Speaker, number 3, outline the ministry's campaign strategy, if any, to market Kenya to the world, including using sports tourism, in order to attract more investors, particularly during these difficult economic times. And finally, Mr. Speaker, state the interventions put in place by the government to curb the counterfeit menace affecting business growth and the quality of products sold in Kenya. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Senator Eddy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this very important statement by my brother and my friend, Senator Cherargei. Because where we are today, Mr. Speaker, if we do not start thinking critically about how we cultivate foreign direct investment into this country, we will have a very big problem. And I'm very proud of the fact that Senator Cherargei has actually intimated the issue of the ministry trying to look keenly on the policy interventions. And this statement comes at the backdrop of the discussion around the BPS. And I know that it has gone to the National Assembly. We have had very interesting conversation with the Ministry of, with the relevant Ministry of Finance. And as Cherargei even submits this statement to the Ministry of Trade, I think that it is very critical that the ministry looks at some of the policy framework that has been put in the consideration of the BPS. Because, Mr. Speaker, where we are today as a country, you'll find that one of the biggest problems that makes it difficult for foreign direct investment to get into the country is the issue of lack of supply of money in the economy. Because when investors make decisions, Mr. Speaker, they make decisions on the basis that they can be able to make profit. And what we saw in the BPS, as is currently, Mr. Speaker, there is a lack of nexus between monetary policy and fiscal policy. Because if these investors are going to make decisions, it's a very simple thing. They're going to look at, is there money in the economy, and can they invest in a way that they can be able to make money? To the extent that the intersect between fiscal policy that we saw in the BPS and the interest rates in the country, Mr. Speaker, is very critical that these policy interventions, as Cherargei has asserted here, Senator Cherargei has asserted here, are looked at. Because right now, what is really facing our country is that investors are making very simple decision of whether the 14% interest rate, profit, management, and risk premiums make sense to them to invest in the country. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, another policy framework that we saw in the BPS that is very critical for the Ministry of Trade and for the Ministry of Trade and Investment and Industry should look at is the issue of which areas should we actually be able to invest as a country to attract this foreign direct investment. In the BPS, Mr. Speaker, we saw a number of areas that the government was trying to say that would be areas that they want to attract investment in. But when foreign investors are making investment decisions, as I said, they're looking at foreign areas, areas of investment that will be able to bring them benefits. Is there a nexus between the policies that we saw in the BPS and areas that can actually attract foreign investors into the country? This is a critical statement, Mr. Speaker, that I think needs the urgency before even the BPS is passed, to the extent that the Ministry of Trade, Investment and Industry should not only do a PR exercise, as Senator Cherargei has talked about the campaign, but it should be based on economics that make sense to the country. And I think there's a big opportunity for the relevant committee to even invite a conversation between the ministry and the Ministry for Finance to look at it. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I support this wonderful statement by my brother, Senator Cherargei, and I hope you can be able to help the country look at areas of being able to invite more FDIs into our country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Sek.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also rise to support this statement from Senator Cherargei. Being the chair on Trade and Industrialization Committee, I want to put my voice on the support of this statement by saying that it's a very weighty matter, and it's very important to understand that the government has put a full state department on investment that is led by the PS and the CS of Trade and Industrialization. I want to put my weight that we'll look at it as a committee and report to this House on matters that has been raised by the Senator, and make sure that at least issues on counterfeit, issues on quality of products and other issues, particularly on protections of trade and local business people, has been taken care of by the statement and the committee in the report that we're going to submit. Mr. Speaker, sir, give me a chance to just put some weight on a few things that has been put in place, or even some statement that has been brought by Mheshimiwa Mwaruma, Senator for Taita Taveta, where he really alluded on the issue of...
Senator Seki, confine yourself to the request made by Senator Cherargei. If you're done,
okay,
kindly yield.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But I think it was, Speaker, I think that these are issues that are very waiting in our county.
I'm aware.
Okay.
If you're to discuss all things that are weighty, we may discuss them till midnight.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
It does not mean that I don't acknowledge the fact that
Thank you.
matters.
Thank you.
Senator Eddy, proceed to make your request.
Thank you once again, Mr. Speaker. My request for statement today regards the liaison of diplomatic and consular missions with the Deputy President's Office. Mr. Speaker, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on National Security and Defense, National Security, Defense and Foreign Relations on the Ministry of Foreign and Diaspora Affairs Directive to diplomatic and consular missions to liaise with the Office of the Deputy President on issues of a cross-cutting nature that involve more than one ministry. Mr. Speaker, in the statement, the committee should, one, state the specific cross-cutting issues the Ministry of Foreign and Diaspora Affairs is referring to in its directive to diplomatic missions to liaise with the Deputy President's Office, stating how the decision to involve the Deputy President's Office in these meetings was reached. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, in the statement, the committee should state the role the ministry will play in facilitating communication between diplomatic missions and the Deputy President's Office, disclosing whether there will be any additional resources allocated to the Deputy President's Office to manage these meetings. Mr. Speaker, 3, in the statement, the committee should apprise the Senate on concerns, if any, on potential conflicts of interest arising from the involvement of the Deputy President's Office in these meetings, stating how these conflicts will be addressed. 4, Mr. Speaker, in the statement, the committee should state whether diplomatic missions will be required to report back to the Ministry of Foreign and Diaspora Affairs on the outcomes of these meetings with the Deputy President's Office, stating the form this reporting will take. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, in the statement, the committee should state the measures, if any, that the Ministry of Foreign and Diaspora Affairs has put in place to ensure that the involvement of the Deputy President's Office does not impede the independence, autonomy, integrity, and impartiality of diplomatic missions in their work on cross-cutting issues. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Mgatana.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the statement by the Honorable Senator Eddy. Mr. Speaker, as the relevant committee is investigating this matter, I would request them to also investigate the question of distribution of members of staff within diplomatic missions. Mr. Speaker, we know that the President of the Republic of Kenya, whenever they take office, like all other presidents, they undertake to reorganize missions and high commissions and embassies across the nation, across the world, where we have representation so that they can reflect the policies which they intend to pursue. Mr. Speaker, a visit to very many diplomatic missions will reveal that the county of Tana River, Mr. Speaker, has very few representation in some of these missions. Mr. Speaker, we want to say the committee should give us the number of people who are in these different missions if they are complying with distribution across counties, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you go to some missions, you will find that they are dominated by people from one county, in fact, one region, in fact, one province, and yet they are representing Kenya. I've been to very many diplomatic missions, Mr. Speaker, and this injustice continues to abate. Mr. Speaker, Coast region, very many people, you'll find they are not there. Tana River County, very many people, you'll find they are not there in diplomatic missions. So, Mr. Speaker, as they investigate the matter raised by the Honorable Eddy, they should also bring a report, Mr. Speaker, on the compositions and personnel in terms of county distribution of members who are employed within diplomatic institutions representing Kenya outside there, Mr. Speaker. We want fairness, and this fairness must be seen, not just talked about. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Kajwang, after you are done with your contribution, you approach the chair, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as a committee looks at this matter, I'd also like to urge them to look into Kenya's foreign policy. The last time Kenya had a formal foreign policy was 2014. But since then, there have been a lot of shifts in geopolitics. The center of the world is moving slowly from the global west. It's moving towards China. It's moving towards India. Africa is rising. We have the Africa Free Continental Trade Area. Mr. Speaker, could the relevant committee also question the Foreign Affairs Ministry on our current foreign policy and why it has not been updated to take stock of changes in global affairs? And Mr. Speaker, when we established the Committee on Security and Foreign Relations in this Senate, we had a big fight with the National Assembly because they thought that the Senate had nothing to do with matters to do foreign policy. In fact, when we travel to other capitals and we pay a visit to ambassadors in those countries, Mr. Speaker, sometimes you are not treated well because the ambassadors feel like the Senate does not appropriate money for their upkeep and for maintenance of their facilities. And so they do not treat members of the Senate as well as they treat members of the National Assembly. This Senate is part of Parliament, and Parliament has got a responsibility to have a say on behalf of the people on the country's foreign policy and the manner in which the country is going to engage with other countries. Mr. Speaker, diplomacy and war are the languages that states used to talk to each other. And Mr. Speaker, I want to say that I'm very proud of you that this past 1 week, we have had the Russia-Africa Parliamentary Conference, which this House has previously participated in. I have had the privilege of accompanying the Speaker of this House to Moscow for a similar function about 4 years ago. But since the war between Russia and Ukraine broke out, Kenya's foreign policy has not been very clear. But the fact, Mr. Speaker, that you are not attending that conference tells us that you are not condoning and you are not standing with the Russians in the aggression towards the Ukrainians. Mr. Speaker, it tells us that you are standing with the people of Ukraine. And if you look at Al Jazeera and CNN, Mr. Speaker, so many African heads of states are in Russia as we speak. So many African speakers are in Russia. So many African members of parliament are in Russia. And I've been there, and I know how they wine and dine African delegations. On day one, you are taken to the Tolstoy Theater. Mr. Speaker, it is golden and, it is one of the most mesmerizing facilities you'll ever see in your life. By the end of your delegation, Mr. Speaker, and in between shots of vodka and mamushkas, who happen to be the ladies in Russia, after 4 or 5 days, Mr. Speaker, it is very difficult to disagree with Russia on anything. But we must be guided by foreign policy. And so, Mr. Speaker, just to cut it short, let this committee compel the national executive to update our foreign policy, to keep it up to date, and to bring it in line with current geopolitical circumstances. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Cheriot.
Mr. Speaker, I was following through this question keenly, actually, the contributions of Senator Kajwang to know all the things he enjoyed in Russia, because I've been with him in Russia, in Moscow before, and I know what he loves most. Unfortunately, he did not list Mr. Speaker. Anyway, Mr. Speaker, this is a very important statement brought by Senator Eddy. Forget about the details of the statement, some of which I feel are matters that are up for debate. But he brings to fore an important conversation that we need to have as a country because of this sudden shift in policy, which I felt has been misunderstood by many in the media and many that are in the public discourse about this particular office involvement in the liaison of the diplomatic and consular missions, Mr. Speaker, because I saw the memo just like the rest of the citizens, and I have taken time to try and understand what is the complexity that perhaps government found. Mr. Speaker, I know you know this for a fact, and even Senator Eddy knows, that the office of a deputy president does not exist as an office on its own. It exists as an office in the presidency, Mr. Speaker. And part of its jurisdictional authority is in the coordination of government functions, part of which includes coordination of diplomatic duties and such like matters, Mr. Speaker. But it will be important if this House is furnished with part of the information which Senator Eddy wants, whether Ministry of Foreign Affairs, either was it as part of them committing or omitting part of what is expected of them in their duties or reason deter, Mr. Speaker, that this policy position was made. Of course, I have seen verbally, because this conversation has been going on for a while. I have seen it online, including I think the permanent secretary in this office saying that it was increasingly becoming difficult for Ministry of Foreign Affairs to keep up with the visiting delegations to the country, as such that it left many of their staff to be shuttling just between Jomo Kenyatta International Airport and Nairobi, and on most occasions, catching up on conversations for which they are ill or worse prepared for, Mr. Speaker. You'd find a technical team visiting perhaps from a particular country, a friendly country to this nation. Since the delegations is high-ranking, then it will mean that Ministry of Foreign Affairs, not, say, the line ministry, like Ministry of Water or Ministry of Roads, which is a line or specific department which they are coming to transact with, are mostly involved, and therefore their interaction is limited only to the time that they had in office. Yet we know, Mr. Speaker, for a fact, and many of our colleagues here do know that, Mr. Speaker, that when we visit other capitals of the world, our interactions run through the length and the depth of formal meetings as well as the informal ones. If that is what they intend to achieve, because I have had that conversation, then it better be spelled out so that this House, which is one of the organs or instruments of oversight on the executive, can fully be appraised The rest of the details that maybe Senator Eddy is looking at, I'm sure will be answered once that cardinal question is responded to, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, I thank and appreciate Senator Eddy for bringing this matter to the House so that we can have a conversation about it. I look forward to the answer that will come from Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Senators, the statements hour is long spent. We have already overshot the runway as far as this order is concerned, and therefore we shall proceed to the next order. Clerk, proceed to the next order, please.
Order number 8, the Natural Resources Benefits Sharing Bill, Senate Bills number 6 of 2022, second reading, division.
Honorable Senators, we will have to defer this particular order owing to the limited delegations present now. So this particular order is deferred to tomorrow, and I hope the two leaders from both the minority and the majority, especially the whips, will make sure that we raise the numbers necessary. The minority side has no excuses whatsoever not to whip, because we have a very able whip in the name of Ledamo Lekina, and there should be no excuses whatsoever why we cannot still raise 24 delegations. So this matter is deferred to tomorrow. Next order.
Order number 9, the County Vocational Education and Training Bill, Senate Bills number 3 of 2022, second reading.
Senator Kajuang.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to move that the County Vocational Education and Training Bill be read a second time. And Mr. Speaker, I will proceed to talk about the key features of this bill that has been before this House. It is not the first time it is coming before the House. It was here in the last session. Unfortunately, we were not able to process it to its finality. Mr. Speaker, this bill seeks to put in place a legal framework to govern the establishment and management of vocational education and training institutions within the counties. As we are all aware, the 4th schedule of the Constitution assigns village polytechnics and homecraft centers to county governments. Mr. Speaker, in the last 10 years, this has been one of the most under-invested areas by county governments. The name village polytechnics denotes an institution that is not fit for people with intellectual capabilities, Mr. Speaker. If you want to tell your younger brother that I want to sponsor you to go to a village polytechnic to study plumbing, Mr. Speaker, they will not accept. But if you tell them that you want to take them to a commercial college somewhere on Tomboya Street, they'll probably accept, thinking that it is superior to the village polytechnic. And yet, in a strict reading of the 4th schedule of the Constitution, even these commercial colleges that we have mushrooming all over, and Kiambu is one area, Mr. Speaker, where every corner you take, you will find some commercial college. You'll find a college on hairdressing, you'll find a college on driving, you'll find a college on business studies, you'll find a college on all sorts of issues. And Mr. Speaker, many of them offer certificates. Vocational training and education has been defined in this bill as those institutions that offer certificates and below. Diploma and above have been defined as national institutions that would then be regulated by the TVET, or the Technical and Vocational Education and Training Act of 2013. Mr. Speaker, whenever we are proposing legislation, the question should be, what is the problem that we are trying to solve? The problem is that in 2013, when we started devolution, we had this Act of Parliament, Technical and Vocational Education and Training Act, we had the TVET authority that was established. The assumption was that the TVET authority was going to take care of, regulate, develop curriculum, define quality standards for all vocational training institutions in the country. In the Constitution of 2010, Mr. Speaker, when we were doing the TVET Act, we forgot that there were certain institutions that had been assigned to counties. So since the onset of devolution, village polytechnics and homecraft centers have been operating almost in an unregulated fashion because the TVET authority has focused on the bigger institutions, which of course have got bigger budgets and have got more students in them. The problem we are trying to solve is that we want to allow county governments to have the regulatory space. We want them to have the statutory instruments to allow them to take over village polytechnics and homecraft centers. And I've seen that the comments from the Education Committee that was looking at this bill had also recommended that these polytechnics in our villages and in our counties, we stop calling them village polytechnics, give them another name so that they can become more attractive to our students. With the TVET authority sitting at the national level, Mr. Speaker, we have seen that these polytechnics and homecraft centers in our counties perhaps do not receive the kind of financing and capitation that is required to take care of the students who are enrolled in those institutions. Mr. Speaker, we have looked at a number of counties, and whenever they appear before my committee, many a times you will find that there's an audit query on transfers that have been made to polytechnics within those counties. One of the interesting findings is that whenever county governments make allocations to polytechnics, there are no modalities, there are no mechanisms to ensure that that money is utilized properly and that returns are brought back to the CEC for finance. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, in terms of capitation, you'll find that different counties sometimes use different guidelines for capitation and for support to students. For a number of years, this Senate has approved a conditional grant that was going to village polytechnics. And Mr. Speaker, that is one area that will require a special audit, because every year we've been appropriating millions of shillings to go to counties so that counties can pass that money to village polytechnics. But we have not seen how that money has been utilized. This bill, Mr. Speaker, will ensure that we have a framework for ensuring that in the polytechnics in our counties and homecraft centers, we have quality standards that are defined. A student who studies plumbing in a polytechnic in Homa Bay should get a certificate and should be subjected to the same quality standards as a student who studies plumbing in a polytechnic in Lamu. Mr. Speaker, what is the curriculum that is used in these polytechnics? Is it a national curriculum or is it supposed to be a county curriculum? Curriculum development and policy is a national government function. And so, Mr. Speaker, even though I'm proposing this bill, we are still saying that the TVET authority will still work with county governments to ensure that there is one universal curriculum that cuts across all vocational centers that are run by counties across the country. The other critical issue, Mr. Speaker, is staffing. What is the qualification of a trainer in a village polytechnic or a homecraft center? We know the qualification required of a primary school teacher. A primary school teacher in Turkana has the same qualifications as a primary school teacher in Nairobi. Is that the same for instructors in our polytechnics? The village polytechnic that is closest to my home, Mr. Speaker, is called Waondo Village Polytechnic. It was built many years ago, and it has suffered because people do not, as I said earlier, do not want to go to a village polytechnic. They want to go to something with a better name. In fact, Mr. Speaker, sometimes when we start institutions in our various localities, we need to be very careful how we name them. Sometimes you have sponsored an institution, and the villagers then agree that that school is going to assume your name. Now you can imagine, Mr. Speaker, a hard-working young person who has gone to secondary school, and then the school is called Senator Methu Secondary School. I mean, what kind of doors will that kind of name open for that child in future? And Mr. Speaker, even though Senator Methu Secondary School might probably have better teachers, a student who went to another school called Oxford Boys Secondary School even though it was in Ngara, would be taken much more seriously. So these issues of nomenclature, Mr. Speaker, we need to address them. Let's not call them village polytechnics, and I think those are some of the ideas that we have coming from stakeholders. Let us give them different names. But what are the qualifications of an instructor? Many a times, you'll find that if it's a plumbing course, the local community will get a good plumber to come and instruct others. Now, a good plumber is not necessarily a good teacher. I have seen a very good carpenter in my village who had been recruited because we had a vacancy for a carpentry instructor. So this neighbor of mine, who's my age mate, who's a very good carpenter, was recruited by the local community to provide instruction to other students. The problem, Mr. Speaker, is that this friend of mine would be drunk. By 8 a.m., he's drunk. And when he goes to class, he insists that he should be called Mr. Awiti, you know, a title befitting his stature as an instructor. We need to bring sanity to these vocational centers in counties. And this bill seeks to give that power to the CEC for education to come up with regulations and guidelines on the qualifications of those people who should be providing instruction to students in vocational centers at the counties. There's also the element of accreditation. Mr. Speaker, there have been a lot of con games, particularly in this space. People open up outlets, they recruit students, and they put in a sweetener that they're going to link them up with foreign institutions. Or they put in a sweetener that Senator Methu hairdressing school has got partnership with Cambridge, the village of Cambridge University. You see, people, when they just hear Cambridge, they don't care. They think it's the one Cambridge, even if it's called the village of Cambridge University. So, Mr. Speaker, students enroll, and they pay money. And then the next day, the proprietors disappear. Who ensures that these people can be followed? Mr. Speaker, it cannot be done in Nairobi. It cannot be done by TVET authority. We must give that power to the CEC for education, to be the one to accredit, to be the one to register, and to be the one to deregister institutions. Mr. Speaker, in some counties, vocational training centers can be a source for revenue because in some cases, students pay. And when they pay that money is meant to ensure that the capacity of those institutions are boosted and some return is made to the county treasury. Therefore, this bill seeks to bring that sanity, and if you go through the bill, you'll find that part 1 of the bill deals with the preliminary matters. It comes out with the various definitions, and one of the most problematic definitions was how to define vocational training and how to define those functions that have been assigned to county governments, that is village polytechnics and homecraft centers, and how distinct they are from the other institutions that the TVET authority has been looking at. And Mr. Speaker, in the bill, we are saying that village polytechnics and homecraft centers will be those institutions that are offering certificates and below. Anything above certificate, that will be regulated and guided by the Technical and Vocational Education Training Act. Mr. Speaker, this bill also makes provisions for trainees with disability, and Clause 7 confers an obligation on county governments to ensure that measures are put in place, including facilities and institutions, to cater for the needs of trainees with disability. Part 2 of the bill sets out the procedure for establishment, registration, accreditation of vocational education and training centers. Mr. Speaker, Clause 8 of the bill categorizes the vocational and training centers as either public or private, and we are aware that private players can also be encouraged to set up these vocational training centers. And as I said earlier, in towns like Thika, in towns like Kiambu, in many towns like Nakuru, there is a multiplicity of commercial colleges and vocational education and training centers. And Mr. Speaker, as things stand now, the only thing that the county government does to those centers is to issue a single business permit. There is nothing else to do with quality. There is nothing else to do with regulation of those centers. It also sets out the criteria for registration and circumstances under which registration of a vocational education and training center may be cancelled or revoked. As I said earlier, The CEC finance in a county should not wait for the TVET authority to crack down on errant village polytechnics and homecraft centers. Mr. Speaker, the bill also outlines procedures to be followed for the sponsorship of public vocational education and training centers by private persons. Religious bodies, more particularly the Catholic Church, has taken a lead role in many of our counties in setting up vocational education and training centers. We are not saying that these centers they've set up should be owned by the county government. We are saying that the county government must be given the tools and instruments to oversight them and to ensure that whatever they are doing remains aligned to the national objectives on training. Mr. Speaker, the bill also specifies the process through which a vocational and educational center may be cancelled and deregistered, and we have attempted to be faithful to the constitutional provision of fair administrative action. Cancellation of the license of a vocational center should never be by executive fiat. This bill has provided detailed procedures that the CEC for education in a county must follow before they can cancel the license of a vocational education center. And there are also penalties that have been specified for violation of various clauses, and part of it is a fine not exceeding 5 million shillings or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 3 years or both. Mr. Speaker, Part 3 of the bill provides for the management of vocational educational centers. It provides that county governments shall be responsible for the management of vocational education and training within the county. And again, this is part of the problem this bill seeks to fix. Because before this bill is enacted, then it will be the TVET authority that will have that power. And Mr. Speaker, those colleagues of ours who are in this house, who have sat as governors, know that the national government many a times wants to claw back on devolution by maintaining institutions that then concentrate finances that should be going to counties at the national level. One of them is the TVET authority. There are many other examples, the roads agencies, the Kenya National Library Services. But Mr. Speaker, even though we claim and even though we accuse the national government of that clawback, it is our responsibility as a Senate to come up with similar legislation that will decouple some of these functions from the national government and send them to the counties. This bill says that every public vocational education and training center shall have a board of management that will be responsible for the conduct of education and training. It also provides for managers and instructors of vocational education and training and their qualification to ensure that the centers are professionally managed. So it is not a matter of looking for a good plumber, even if he's a drunkard. It is a matter of looking for a good plumber who is for the comfort of members, I still have 1 hour. But I will, Mr. Speaker, truncate it. I will truncate it, Mr. Speaker, because I know we have Senator Gloria is getting into the next cycle, and we need to deal with a few things that she has brought to this House. Mr. Speaker, let me proceed extremely carefully, because those cycles are never guaranteed. They are easily broken.
Senator Kajwang, kindly focus. You really get excited in that area. Just proceed, and proceed to move.
The thing is, I'm trying to recall where I was before where we are. Mr. Speaker, we were in the good plumber, but a poor trainer. So this bill will make sure that if you are to be an instructor, you are a good plumber, but you're also a good trainer. And also this bill provides that the vocational education and training centers shall issue an annual report on governance. That has not been happening. And this annual report on governance would be sent to the CEC education and would be shared with the county assembly. Mr. Speaker, Part 4 of the bill, if you look at it, provides for standards and quality of education and training, and it sets out provisions relating to the curriculum, vocational education and training programs to be implemented, examination and competency assessment. Examinations shall not be county examinations. Curriculum shall not be county curriculum. This bill proposes that we have a national curriculum because curriculum is an expression of policy, and we also have national examinations. The recognized curriculum development bodies shall be responsible for developing the curricula, while the recognized examination, assessment, and certification bodies shall be responsible for administering assessment and issuance of certifications. So, as I said earlier, Mr. Speaker, the examination that will be done in northern Kenya will be the same as the examination that is done in western, eastern, southern, and central Kenya. We'll have a standard curriculum and standard examinations. And Mr. Speaker, this is extremely important because we have seen two big events that have happened in the last 3 years. One was the Expo in Dubai. Mr. Speaker, that attracted a lot of artisans from Kenya. And most of those artisans are graduates of these vocational training centers. Most of them were certificate holders. And yet, in countries like Dubai, their craft and their skills fetched a lot of money, far much more than what they would get if they were in Kenya. Another event was a World Cup that was held in Qatar. Mr. Speaker, a lot of Kenyans went there, and they were not just going to do house jobs or domestic jobs. They were going there to do artisan and craft kind of jobs. And Mr. Speaker, I know a number of Kenyans who benefited from the Expo in Dubai, who benefited from the World Cup in Qatar. And Mr. Speaker, their lives have changed in a way that would not have been possible had they stayed in Kenya. But the reason why their lives have changed is because of the kind of hands-on training that they got from these vocational centers. In fact, if you want to get a job in the Gulf, in the Middle East, you are better off as a skilled artisan rather than as a white-collar worker. If you go to the Gulf with a bachelor's in software engineering and someone else is going to the Gulf with a certificate in electrical installation, that person going with a certificate in electrical installation would probably get a job faster than the guy with a white-collar certification. And that's why we want to make sure that graduates of vocational training centers in Kenya, when they hold a certificate, if they go to Dubai, if they go to Qatar, if they go to Australia, if they go to Canada, that certification is recognized because it has been issued by a relevant and recognized body. Mr. Speaker, Part 5 of the bill sets out transition provisions in relation to existing institutions offering vocational education and training which are subject to registration under this Act. Once the Act becomes operational, all institutions offering vocational education and training which are registered under Basic Education Act, the Technical and Vocational Education and Training Act, and offering courses up to artisan certificate level, and those institutions, as the Cabinet Secretary specifies, shall be deemed registered under the Act. Mr. Speaker, this tells you that you've got a lot of institutions that have been licensed under different pieces of legislation. Basic Education Act, Technical and Vocational Education and Training Act, and several others which offer courses up to artisan certificate level. One interesting observation, Mr. Speaker, is to do with institutions that are offering computer courses. There are a lot of them in the city of Nairobi. The question is, who should regulate them? And who should accredit them? Who should license them? And who should deregister them if they are offering sham qualifications? And Mr. Speaker, Senator Osotsi, who has been my colleague in the information and communication technology space, probably knows that many of the computer colleges in the city of Nairobi and across the country pay a nominal fee to the Computer Society of Kenya for examinations. And the question I've asked is, under what law, under what statute, under what statutory instrument is that enforced? And Mr. Speaker, we have not been able to get the answer. What we are saying is that with the passage of this bill, and once enacted, that all these institutions that have been licensed under different pieces of legislation that existed before devolution, all of them shall be deemed to be registered under the Act. County governments shall take over. And if there are computer colleges in your county, hairdressing colleges, including even driving schools, Mr. Speaker, those then should be regulated by the county government. And Mr. Speaker, when you talk of driving schools, the question is, are they vocational training centers? Because they don't offer diplomas. They offer licenses, and sometimes they offer certificates. To what extent are county governments involved in the regulation and in the oversight of driving schools in our respective counties? These senators here spend a lot of money every other year when border riders come to our doorsteps and tell us that they want us to sponsor them to get licenses from these driving schools. Who regulates them? It cannot be NTSA. The county government must also be involved in that space. Mr. Speaker, Part 6 of the bill contains miscellaneous provisions. Clause 37 contains a general penalty for offenses committed under the bill, and it talks about various offenses. The consequences of the bill is that it seeks to put in place a legal framework that creates governance in the establishment and management of vocational education and training in county governments. Therefore, if enacted, it will create significant changes to the current structure of county vocational education and training institutions, whether private or public. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Senate Standing Committee on Education that has facilitated public participation on this bill. And Senator Joe Nyutu and the team that he leads did an excellent job. They have made a lot of suggestions on how to improve this bill. They have captured the views of stakeholders, from the Council of Governors to the TVET Authority, to the national government, to various associations that are involved in that space. And Mr. Speaker, I want to assure the Education Committee that the proposals they've made for amendment to the bill, I will embrace them, because I believe that they are intended to make the bill better, and they're intended to ensure that this bill can be applied or can be implemented almost immediately once it is enacted. Mr. Speaker, I want to urge my fellow colleagues just to look at this bill to reflect on the state of vocational training and education in their respective counties, to reflect on the state and the status of homecraft centers in their respective counties. Mr. Speaker, 10 years after devolution, we have dealt with the issues of setting up. We have dealt with the issues of structure. We've dealt with issues of financial management systems, of human resource management systems. It is time now to deal with issues of talent and capacity development. Mr. Speaker, we as a House have passed a bill or have considered the bill on early childhood education. It is time for us now to address the other gap, the other function that is assigned to county governments, and that is the village polytechnics and homecraft centers. And Mr. Speaker, if there ever was a constitutional amendment, one of the amendments would be that fourth schedule, so that we no longer call them village polytechnics, but call them vocational training centers at county level, find a name that we can use to refer to them, so that our young boys and girls can see the potential in them, and our young boys and girls can get the incentive to go there. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, as I earlier commented when we had the students from Masai Mara University, and I think that my colleagues must have taken me out of context, we need more political scientists. We need more scientists in all the disciplines. We need people to take a scientific approach to everything that we do. Perhaps what we don't need is more politicians, Mr. Speaker. Politicians, as I said, don't need a qualification, but political scientists and political science is a very well-respected profession. Back in the days, the rich would send their children to Oxford and Cambridge, and they would study politics, economics, and history. Mr. Speaker, the bulk of prime ministers in the House of Commons have gone through Oxford and Cambridge, and many of them have studied politics, economics, and history. So yes, we need more political scientists. We probably just don't need more politicians in this country. And through these technical and vocational education centers, Mr. Speaker, we'll be able to ensure that the hustlers, those who do things with their hands on the roadsides, they can get a certification. And Mr. Speaker, we spoke about recognition of prior learning, and that is something that we must also incorporate in this bill, to ensure that those people who have had a long experience, like that very good carpenter I talked about, but is drunk by 8 a.m., if we can rehabilitate him and then his skills at carpentry. Through that RPOL, recognition of prior learning, we convert that skill and experience into a certificate. That then would allow that very good carpenter to even bid for county jobs. It would allow that good carpenter to go to Dubai, to go to Doha, and to go to other global capitals, because he will have obtained a certificate that recognizes his skills and competencies. And Mr. Speaker, that is part of what this bill intends to do. Mr. Speaker, I wish to call upon the very able and the very, Mr. Speaker, I lost my track of thought because I just remembered what this senator said in a rally somewhere in Migori. She's called Senator Beatrice Ogola. She'll be my seconder. She said some very interesting things about her, which I cannot translate into English, but she's going to be my seconder. I call upon Senator Beatrice Ogola to second the bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, thank you, Senator Kajwang. In the course of the many years we are going to be at this Senate, Honorable Speaker, you'll get to know about what I said in Migori. But it is all about myself, and I think everybody, yeah, and my size, and everybody, the size of so many things. But Honorable Speaker, I rise to second this noble bill, the County Vocational, Educational and Training Bill, that is Senate Bill number 3 of 2022, by my able senator, Senator Moses Kajwang. Honorable Speaker, I second this bill basically because, Honorable Speaker, it addresses a core aspect of education that is devolved and that is core to our counties. Honorable Speaker, this bill, I second it because it addresses the issue of governance and the management of the county vocational education and the training centers. It addresses the issue of standards, and Senator Kajwang, the mover talks about the quality, both standards and quality of education. Honorable Speaker, this quality is not only limited to the learners, but also addresses the quality of tutors that are going to take the learners through their education. Honorable Speaker, some of the skills that the vocational training institutes provide are so critical to even the urban space that we were addressing earlier by Senator Seki. Honorable Speaker, it is proposed that by 2030 or 2035, 65% of Kenyans or of the world will be occupying the urban space. And Honorable Speaker, these are some of the skills that will be needed as we grow the urban skills. I was impressed that Senator Kajwang talks about carpenters, plumbers, welders, that will have skills that are not only acquired through times of working with other skilled personnel, but there will be carpenters and plumbers and saloonists, and all the skills that we get from these training and educational centers will not only be acquired with the time, but will also have been formally passed on to the learners. Honorable Speaker, I also second this bill because this bill provides for accreditation that will be done not only by the County Executive Committee member, but I'm happy that as this is done, it will also be under the guidance and standards that are set by the national standards of the vocational and educational training bills as provided nationally. Honorable Speaker, an aspect that also makes me second this bill is that there's also a criteria that is set for the registration and the registration of these schools, of these vocational centers at their establishment. So, Honorable Speaker, these skills that the vocational educational centers provide to me and to everybody else is the answer, is the basic solution that is going to address also the unemployment situation that we have in this country. A number of people or our students struggle going to the university, which I say is good enough also, Honorable Speaker, but we also need people that will provide the skills that we need in our homes, that we need for growth, and we need for the progress of this county. So, Honorable Speaker, I second this bill.
Thank you, Honorable Beatrice Kenya. You know, you're aware of our standing orders. You've been here long enough that once you make a statement, you must substantiate it. You've talked about your size and the size of many other things, and you've left that statement in abeyance. I may not give you the opportunity now, but at some point, I'll be calling upon you to substantiate on the sizes that you've been talking about. Honorable Senators, I do now propose the question that the County Vocational Education and Training Bill, Senate Bills number 3 of 2022, be now read a second time. We'll allow contributions. Looking at the queue, certainly a number of senators, in fact, all of us, it seems, would wish to make a contribution to this very important bill. And therefore, if we allow each senator to speak for 20 minutes, we may end up with only about 4 senators speaking to this bill. Honorable senators, with your consensus, therefore, allow us to limit contribution per speaker to about 5 minutes, to 10 minutes. So 10 minutes it is. The Honorable Cheriot.
No. You know, Mr. Speaker, thank you, Mr. Speaker, but protecting from the Deputy Minority Leader. You know, I love a good debate, Mr. Speaker, and I've been a debater all my life. In fact, I've been part of those who have requested that, if possible, and I defer to your wisdom and guidance, Mr. Speaker, that in the interest of time we allow all our colleagues to speak. But this is one such important matter that I wanted all of us, we could have the full time. Mr. Speaker, I stand guided and I'll try and compress my thoughts quickly in about 10 minutes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, first of all, I want to commend the Committee on Education. If my memory serves me right, Mr. Speaker, this is the first committee of this Senate to file their report before the second reading of a bill that has been brought to this House, Mr. Speaker. I know earlier on, and there'll be moments where we'll have a debate about this, we had a good debate at the Senate Business Committee on what is actually the accurate time to file a committee report during, after, or before the second reading. And there'll be moments to have that conversation. But be that as it may, Mr. Speaker, given that many members rely on the reports of a committee to inform their thoughts during debate, I wish to celebrate the work of this committee led by my good friend, Senator Joe Nyotu of Murang'a, for being industrious enough and ensuring that they have received submissions, I have seen listed, for about 32 entities that were all interested in enriching this bill, Mr. Speaker. It's important, as Senator Kajwang pointed out, for colleague senators to remember the history of how this bill came about, Mr. Speaker. About 4, 5, or 6 years ago, when we did division of revenue bill, Mr. Speaker, part of the conditional grants that had been granted to various counties was a 2 billion grant that was divided equally amongst the various counties. And it appeared to us, because as a member of Budget and Finance then, Mr. Speaker, that somebody saw a spare 2 billion in the books of accounts of government and just said, we may as well just throw it to the village polytechnics and let each and every county do as they wish, Mr. Speaker. That was the beginning of trouble, because in the subsequent financial years, Mr. Speaker, different counties chose to do different things. Some painted, because I think each county was getting close to 200 million or something close to that. I can't fully recall the exact figures, Mr. Speaker. But in the subsequent financial year, you could see the trouble of allocating money without first thinking through what exactly it was meant to achieve, Mr. Speaker. And that is part of what this bill seeks to cure. This is long overdue, Mr. Speaker, because in the audit reports, if you look at it, must be financial year 18-19, you will see that different county governments actually decided to do various things with this particular money, Mr. Speaker. Some painted, others set up rabbit urine fetching projects for their county members and said that's a vocational duty as well, and different things, as ridiculous as you may want to imagine. And it's upon that foundation, Mr. Speaker, that the exercise of reforming what you'd refer then as village polytechnics, but this bill now wants to give it the proper nomenclature. One of the things that I celebrate about this bill, by having a better terminology, vocational training centers, Mr. Speaker. Back then we referred them as village polytechnics, Mr. Speaker. So I celebrate the fact that, first of all, just to give decency, even if for nothing else, just to have a better public relation of these particular centers, Mr. Speaker, so that somebody can proudly come to this Senate and say, while you may be proud to have gone to such and such university, and say, I'm a proud graduate of Kapchebet, that's the name of my village, Mr. Speaker, vocational training center, where I learned a particular trade, and that's what I've excelled in. I've made my money, I've lived a decent life out of it, because that is that which we want out of this particular bill, Mr. Speaker. It is also important that in this bill, county governments have been now granted the role to set that which they intended at that particular time. But we felt that there wasn't proper guidance to our county governments on what they were setting up in all these vocational training centers, Mr. Speaker. And the proposal to allow a county be specific in the courses and the trainings that they are offering in these vocational training centers, Mr. Speaker, is brilliant. Part of the reasons why many countries have moved and leapfrogged Kenya in terms of their industrialization process, Mr. Speaker, is that they do not seek to ape other developed countries. They excel in that which they are good at, Mr. Speaker. And that's a good foundation that you want to ensure that if you're a county that is blessed in a particular trade, that's what you set your village, your vocational training centers to be about, Mr. Speaker, so that your young people can have the opportunity to be able to excel in whatever trade they are good in. If you live close by to the lake like Senator Kajwang, then you will set up vocational training centers that are related to the economic activity of that particular region. It doesn't make sense whatsoever to learn other trades for which you know you will never even have the opportunity to ply your trade and make a good living out of it, Mr. Speaker. And the same applies to all of us. Each village, each county has for good reason, areas where they are specific and good about it. I appreciate also that there is proposal that will make sure that these centers are professionally managed, ensure that issues of governance are addressed. I like the fact that on year-in, year-out basis, before this House and other instruments of government, of accountability, Mr. Speaker, they will file their governance report. And we shall be able to see the number of students they have, the fees they pay, how that has been utilized, what development is going on in that particular institution, Mr. Speaker. That will help us. I like also the nexus that has been created between the TVETs, the technical vocational education training centers, and the VTC, vocational training centers. Vocational training centers are the breeding ground that feeds into the TVETs and the national polytechnics, Mr. Speaker. If we left it as it was, Mr. Speaker, then there was no clear career path for those who are beginning trainings in this trade, Mr. Speaker, to know where they're headed. But given the nexus that has been created in this bill, Mr. Speaker, and this is one of the best well-thought-out bills that I have seen come before this House this particular term, Mr. Speaker, because we shall now ensure, and there is even use of technology, Mr. Speaker, because if you read further down the line, Mr. Speaker, you'll find that there is a linkage between the TVET's management information system and the Kenya Labor Management Information System, meaning even as you train as a young person, you are able to log in from your village polytechnic somewhere down in Busia and be able to see that at this point I'm doing a certificate in my vocational training center, but the next institutions of TVETs that are available to help me grow and enhance my career are found in this particular part of the country. And eventually, the job opportunities that are available are in this and that other part of the country, Mr. Speaker. Finally, Mr. Speaker, one of the main reasons that I support this particular bill, and I wish Senator Eddie Okech was part of us while I debate this, Mr. Speaker, because he had brought something about our foreign missions and part of the work that we should be doing, Mr. Speaker. I know it's nice of him, and we celebrated when he brought the statement about the coordination in Ministry of Foreign Affairs activities at the office of the Deputy President. But I feel we may even raise the argument and the debate in this House and press demand of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, apart just from the simple mundane duties of coordination, is to know Kenya is celebrated globally, Mr. Speaker, for the kind of skilled labor that we give to the rest of the world. From the Gulf countries, even to the nurses that we send all the way to the UK, Mr. Speaker, this is a time that we should be demanding, Mr. Speaker, from Ministry of Foreign Affairs, because I know for a fact that part of the hindrances that young people run into, even in the Gulf countries, Mr. Speaker, and I'd have it, Senator Kajwang, that you may need to counter-check, that Kenyans are actually not allowed to partake many of this skilled labor because of very simple, what you call policy agreements that don't exist between us and some of these countries. Something that if we are able to push as Parliament and show and demonstrate to them that some of our plumbers and masons are even better than the Indians that they use, say, in the UAE, that our training match pound for pound with the very best in the world, then we should be able to reach. I'll stop at that, Mr. Speaker, because I see time is out, but I celebrate the good work of this committee. Good bill that is sponsored by Senator Moses Kajwang. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well spoken, Majority Leader. I want to take this opportunity to congratulate the two members of the Senate. Senator Raila Odinga, who is now the current minority whip, and my friend Senator Sifuna, who is the current deputy minority whip. Congratulations. Now, now we are back to serious business, I know, yes. So I want to give this opportunity to Senator Raila Odinga.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me appreciate your congratulations and thank you for the role that you played. You played a very significant role, which I know. I know it very well. And like I said, I will come and visit you with wazers in your village and bring some boozies so we can celebrate. You know, politics, Mr. Speaker, we should all remember that we are here to represent our people. And as I stand here to support the bill by my good friend, Senator Moses Otieno Kajwang, I want to remind Kenyans that in every training that we carry, in every profession, if it is a hotel, you will require technical support. If any profession, even, in fact, I dare say, the number of doctors who are employed or the demand for doctors is not equal to the demand of plumbers. It is not equal to the demand of carpenters. It is not equal to the demand of electricians. Mr. Speaker, this bill speaks to the heart of creating employment in this country. Mr. Speaker, the reason why I support this bill is basically because of what is happening in our country. If you look at the informal sector, which contributes immensely to the economy of this country, and you ask yourself whether really doctors, lawyers are the ones who pay the most in taxes, or it is these people who are not recognized. Mr. Speaker, I support the bill, and I hope that the draft of this bill, the distinguished senator from Homa Bay, can consider adding, maybe bringing an amendment to ensure that the last statement that he made of recognizing prior learning experience is actually entrenched into the bill so that those people who are born as artisans can actually be given certificates and they can be recognized and will be given an opportunity to train other Kenyans to allow them to be able to get jobs. Mr. Speaker, sir, sometimes when you look for a plumber, you don't get one. Mr. Speaker, sir, sometimes when you look for an electrician, you don't get one. So this bill actually helps a lot. It helps, and I like the fact that in the fourth schedule, maybe that's the only part that I will differ a little bit with my colleague, if I heard him correctly, in terms of the amendment of the Constitution. The only thing that we should do if we are to amend is to ensure that we send more money to support these vocational training centers. County governments should take their role. I like the fact that he wants the county governments to be able to support this vocational training. The only part which I think we are over-regulating is if we now also require that we regulate on driving schools, we regulate on barber shops, we regulate on beauty parlors. Mr. Speaker, in this country, so long as we've already regulated the training, allow people to go and make their money. The problem we have in this country, Mr. Speaker, is that we are in love with taxation. We overtax people. Recently, Mr. Speaker, sir, I got a call from KEBS telling me that, oh, in your manufacturing of milk, we now want you to start paying another levy in terms of taxes. You know, we are trying to kill the manufacturing sector in this country. So when you now require that even a hairdresser is regulated by the county government, that the county government will begin taxing that hairdresser. A driving school being taxed, as if we are not taxed enough. You're already paying the VAT. The only way, in fact, I always believe that the only way we can actually be able to lower the cost of living in this country is, first of all, by eliminating unnecessary taxation of our people. We overtax our people. And I feel bad that we are overtaxing our people so that we can please the West, we can please IMF and all the other Bretton Woods institutes, that we can be able to pay the loans that they give us. So what we should do now is to only regulate. I like the fact that the bill attempts to regulate this, set up standardized exams all across the country so that any mushrooming vocational trainings that can be able to come, they can actually exist with, following a particular statutory. So, Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, I'd like to request Senator Kajwang to really think about adding that aspect of ensuring that we recognize prior learning experiences in the bill so that we can now, every county can start registering how many people are plumbers, who they have just learned out of experience. How many people are mercenaries? They have just learned out of experience. How many people are electricians? In my own farm, Mr. Speaker, I have two young men. One is called Muncha and the other one is called Sankei. Sankei has never gone to any school to learn electrical work, but he's a good electrician now. He's learned through experience. Muncha has never gone to any school to learn plumbing, but he has been trained by another young man called Kibugi, who comes from Kikuyu, and they can now work together. So, Mr. Speaker, this bill is very important, and I hope that every senator will contribute to it, and we can expedite the processing of this bill, finalize even today if we can, so that it becomes an act of parliament. Otherwise, Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rendama. And attention, Senator Kajwang, this is no longer Senator Kajwang's bill. It is a property of this House. So you can recommend as many amendments as possible. So maybe you just class with him and see where you can be able to make amendments, because it's a good bill for Kenyans. Let us get Senator Danson Mungatana.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the bill which has been brought by the Honorable Senator Kajwang. Mr. Speaker, this bill addresses one critical issue: respect for the person who is involved in skilled or artisan trade. Mr. Speaker, for a very long time, people who failed to go to upper secondary and then university, we would look down upon them. Mr. Speaker, this bill creates a formula for us to recognize trainings that are obtained by people who study bakery and cooking cakes and specialize in that. People who study phone repairs and electrical repairs, people who do electronic repairs, and we recognize them in that. People who do mechanic jobs, Mr. Speaker, and recognize them for who they are and the value which they add to the economy. Mr. Speaker, with this bill, we hope that that respect will be brought back to that sort of training. So this bill, Mr. Speaker, addresses one important issue: the issue of recognizing artisan training, which has not been there for a long, long time. Mr. Speaker, you will recall that in 2003, when President Kibaki came into power, he introduced the free primary education into the country. And as a result of that, Mr. Speaker, so many students came and joined the primary schools, and then they went on to secondary. But many of them, Mr. Speaker, at that time, before the secondary education came into process, they were not able to go to secondary schools. And even those who went to secondary, the seams were bursting in the secondary schools, and many of them could not go to university. So, Mr. Speaker, these TVET colleges are a necessity because they create employment, they create respectability, and there are people, Mr. Speaker, who would never be able to study law like I did, but they would be able to fix things which I can't because of the way their brains are set up. Mr. Speaker, there is one issue that this bill addresses. In clause 5 of this bill, the issue of resource constraints has been thoroughly addressed. Mr. Speaker, previously, the TVETs have been left to the masses of students who are registered there to support them, and also to the capitation from the national government, which is never sufficient. Mr. Speaker, now in clause 5, resource constraints, which has been one of the big challenges for TVET colleges, has been addressed. Mr. Speaker, the responsibility of resourcing these colleges has been placed squarely on the hands on the hands of county government. So, Mr. Speaker, it therefore means that county governments going forward will have to look for funds and ring-fence funds so that TVET colleges within their areas are able to function and function effectively. Mr. Speaker, even when you read down the bill further, you would see that the bill proposes that those who will be in the management board will be paid a stipend to be determined by the SRC. And Mr. Speaker, they would be paid as employees of the County Public Service Board. So, Mr. Speaker, one of the critical issues that have made these institutions not perform very well, this is the issue of resource constraints, has been addressed. So, Mr. Speaker, now we have an entity in the name of county government that is dealing with this matter specifically. And this is a commendable intervention that has been proposed. Mr. Speaker, The issue that I would want my colleague, Senator Kajwang, to look at maybe more critically is the staffing of these institutions. Mr. Speaker, the trainers of TVET colleges, it is proposed in this bill that they will be employed by the county government. But when you look at the history of the trainers of TVET colleges, they were initially employed by the Teacher Service Commission, the TSC. Then, Mr. Speaker, at some point, the TSC divorced itself from them, and they became employees of the Public Service Commission. So right now, the trainers of all these TVETs are employees of the Public Service Commission. Mr. Speaker, litigation has been brought because what happens, the question that the litigation was asking in court, is the benefits of these people who had been employed and they were in TSC and now they've been shifted to PSC and they are not able to access their retirement benefits in the manner that it should be. Mr. Speaker, now this bill is saying we are going to shift them from the PSC, we are bringing them now to be employees of the County Public Service Board. Mr. Speaker, I wanted the Honorable Senator Kajwang to look at this clearly so that there is clear provision. What happens to these people? Who is going to pay their retirement benefits? Who is going to take care of them? And all the accumulated issues. I would also invite Senator Kajwang to look at the litigation that has gone on in this matter, because there has been very serious litigation in the High Court about the benefits of these trainers. This bill has not provided for those issues at the transitional level, and I would want Honorable Kajwang, and I know he's a very sharp man, and he's listening and taking notes, to look at it and see how we can protect these trainers, because these trainers, they are not many, first of all. Secondly, they are not well paid. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, they have been shifted from department to department in the same government, Mr. Speaker, and they have not been treated well. And because of not being treated well, Mr. Speaker, their output also at the end has not been very professional. In many cases, some of them have died without being paid. Mr. Speaker, we would encourage very clear transitional provision in as far as the trainers are concerned. Mr. Speaker, the other issue that we need to look at TVETs, which has been in a way mentioned. Mr. Speaker, still the authority at the national level is maintaining substantial power, and they can justify retaining a lot of money at the national level. So, Mr. Speaker, I was proposing, if the bill can be very clear, that the national level should have insignificant, maybe 30% or 20% of the funds that are supposed to go down to TVETs. Because as the senator has said, they use this, Mr. Speaker, to clearly justify keeping most of the money at the national level, and it does not reach the colleges. Mr. Speaker, the TVET colleges that are in Tana River County, for example, Mr. Speaker, they are starved of funds, they are starved of quality materials, they are starved of teachers, the trainers, they call them trainers. Mr. Speaker, why? Because the national level has continued to maintain, and they give themselves work of, for example, visiting. They say they are going to do quality assessment of the colleges, and they use most of the budget traveling across the 47 counties. And Mr. Speaker, this is a way of killing this very good initiative that has been started from the days of President Mwai Kibaki. Mr. Speaker, we would like to see these issues addressed in the bill. I'm praying, Mr. Speaker, as I wind down, Mr. Speaker, because I see my time is over, that the Honorable Senator Kajwang can find a nice way of making sure that money that is coming
I repeat again that I can see members are really interested in this bill,
Senator Mgatana, just approach Senator Kajwang and see what you can do within this, before the second reading is over. You make the necessary amendments, then we did empower the bill more. Let us have the Deputy Minority Whip, Linda, Senator Wambua Enoch.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I also want to join you before I go into this bill to congratulate our whips, Senator Ledama Olekina and Senator Edwin Sifuna, for retaining the positions that they were assigned by the leadership of the minority. Mr. Speaker, there's one thing I've been telling people in Kitui, and I want to pass the same message to Olekina, Sifuna senators. That's a good thing to celebrate you bagged. It's a good thing to celebrate. So find time and reason to celebrate. Yeah. The Speaker, let's go back to this bill by our good friend, Senator Kajwang. Generally, a very good bill. The Speaker, I want to thank Senator Kajwang for the clarity that he brings to vocational training in the country. There has been a lot of confusion within institutions that offer vocational training, and I thank him that now this bill brings clarity, that this bill, vocational training, will cover institutions that are offering certificates and below, and that then other institutions that are offering diplomas going forward then will be covered by a different bill. So, Speaker, you know this country lately has suffered consequences of our own success in the education sector. With the expansion of university education, what has happened is that almost every public and private university in this country worth its name, they have been coming to our villages, our towns, and buying off vocational training institutions. For that reason, what is happening is that now we have a deficit of semi-skilled labor in especially the construction industry. This bill, Mr. Speaker, comes at a time that this country needs proper training of artisans in all spheres of industry. And I am reminded, Mr. Speaker, that until recently, this country did not actually have a specialist in live pipeline welding, that we had to rely on experts from outside the country, importing welders from China, India, to come and do live pipeline welding. I am now grateful, Mr. Speaker, that one Chepkoech Chumo has become the first woman live pipeline welder. And now they can train other people in pipeline welding. So, Speaker, let me go straight to the bill, the clauses that I've gone through. Clause 3, on the guiding principles, I am happy that it brings focus to public participation on all decision-making initiatives for vocational education and training. Mr. Speaker, the promoter of the bill talks about technology transfer in clause 3. I would actually want to urge Senator Kajwang to consider
not just technology transfer, but an exchange program ingrained in the law, so that as we aspire to achieve standardization in training, we have exchange programs between village polytechnics in different counties, offering the same or complementary training programs. The Speaker, on clause 4, the responsibility is assigned to the national government on training policy, examination standards, and especially on the issue of examination standards in vocational training institutions. The Speaker, as things stand now, a lot of those village polytechnics, and I am happy Senator Kajwang thinks we should change that name to a more honorable nomenclature. Teachers come and set their own exams, and the students are tested on what the teacher thinks is the right thing to be tested on. We need standardization. We need the ministry responsible for vocational training to be able to set standards, and especially examination standards. The Speaker, on the responsibilities of county governments in clause 5, I want to request the promoter of this bill, Senator Kajwang, to consider, because he talks about collaboration with international and national and local institutions, to consider being a little more broad, so don't limit yourself to partnerships with institutions, but really partnership with industry. For what reason? For the reason that, as a Speaker, I'm looking at a situation where local vocational training institutions should have a working relationship with local contractors. Say a contractor has been given a project to do a road which will take 3 years, they are paid 3 billion. Why would that contractor not sponsor students in local vocational training institutions where the road is, to train them in masonry, civil certification, so that they get labor for their contract from within the community, and also help the village polytechnics and vocational training institutions to grow. The Speaker, the same thing applies to clause 10 on a declaration now that private persons like me can sponsor a public vocational education and training center. I think this is very, very important. In the same analogy that I've given with local contractors, the Speaker, you realize that we have local contractors who have serious money that they can put into educational.
Thank you, Senator Wambua. Senator Zigay Wakirirale, you have the floor.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to also contribute and laud the bill by the Honorable Senator Kajwang. Mr. Speaker, I've listened to members contributing to this bill, and I must commend the fact that there is unison in the desire to ensure that at the lowest level of these training institutions, we honorably refer them by the name that they deserve. I am aware, Mr. Speaker, that every other senator or person in this House at any given time desires the specialized services of the people who have been trained through such institutions. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, calling them by the appropriate name makes it an honorable position and encourages maximum utilization of the expertise of those people. Mr. Speaker, sir, the artisans and the persons who actually are trained through these institutions are going to be granted an opportunity to have a very competitive edge, both in the local and international markets, especially where they have been recognized through a consistent structure of examination and recognition of their certificates. The bill, Mr. Speaker, I'm aware, provides an opportunity where the examination is harmonized, certification is proper, and accreditation will be facilitated, especially where the courses which are being offered by such institutions are recognized not only at the county level but beyond, so that the students or the graduates from such institutions are able to compete for opportunities beyond their counties or constituencies. I am aware, Mr. Speaker, further that at any given society where there is an opportunity, especially in terms of academic qualifications, if one is denied an extension beyond their primary examination, not because of their inability to pass the requisite exams, but because of challenges that in most cases we are aware arises out of lack of school fees, the less advantaged institutions or families where they are unable to further their education can do so within such institutions, which once they are properly set up and funded as it is provided for in the bill, they will expand their knowledge, they will expand their interest in the areas where such students or young men and women are interested in pursuing. Mr. Speaker, the training in such institutions are largely practical rather than theory. And the provisions of the bill will also give an opportunity to ensure that those who have certain expertise, certain knowledge without necessarily having gone through recognized institutions will also be given an opportunity, as it has been supported by one member here, that previous or rather experiences are going to be recognized, and by that the person who has previous experience or is able to do certain expertise within a certain area will have also that to be certified for them to be able to move beyond where they have reached in their academic guest. I want to laud, Mr. Speaker, under the provisions of Part 3, where the bill recognizes and provides for annual governance report. Mr. Speaker, this bill is, or rather the institution will be managed at the county level, and the bill provides that the institution through its board of management will be expected to give an annual governance report. This way, Mr. Speaker, will give an opportunity not only to the institution, but to the public at large to ensure that the institution is governed in a manner that is recognized, in a manner that gives an opportunity to the public to participate, and by extension, public resources which are invested in the institution are properly utilized and accounted for. I laud the Honorable Kajwang for ensuring that that provision is available in the bill. I would only encourage that in the same Part 3, where there is the creation of the board of management of the institutions, which in this case we have been given the number and how the board of management are to be formed or set up. I would wish that Senator Kajwang introduces a provision where this board of management mandate can extend to creation of income generating sectors within within the units or the training sectors or departments in the institutions. Because when we have recognized certain expertise and have granted certificates, I think the institution can gain by ensuring that certain departments can be created as investment forums where the mandate of the board, if it allows, can be utilized by the institution so that the institution can earn not only to the benefit of the students, but to that particular institution itself. I'm saying this, Honorable Speaker, because we are aware that, as the Honorable Adama said, a number of the students who would be in these institutions have prior experience out of use or challenges that they have gone through, and while they are in school, they can also generate income by utilizing that knowledge they have gained before they are done with the training, before they are certified, and by extension, it is a mode of income generating to the student as well as the institution. And that can only happen so that it can supplement the resources which is normally dispersed or which will be disbursed to the institution by the governments with the responsibility to ensure that the resources are properly utilized. Mr. Speaker, I want to appreciate the Honorable Kajwang for bringing out such a bill, which is very, very important. It cuts across all areas, not only at the national level, but the county level, and also accommodates all people of various academic levels and abilities. Mr. Speaker, I thank you, the Honorable Kajwang, for this particular and important bill. Thank you.
Okay, Senator Ososi Gonfrey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to also make my contribution to this very, very important bill by Honorable Kajwang. Mr. Speaker, maybe before I make my contribution, there is a very important point that was raised by the majority leader in regards to at what point should the committee reports be available to us. Mr. Speaker, first of all, I want to commend the Education Committee for ensuring that the report is tabled in time. I think, Mr. Speaker, you are the chair of the Liaison Committee. We need to encourage our committees to table the reports so that members have sufficient time to go through the reports before second reading debate. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to encourage that maybe in our standing orders, we need to really insist that the reports must be tabled before we engage in second reading. I find that to be very smooth, and it is quite useful to the members so that they can make informed contributions on the matter. But even as I say that, Mr. Speaker, I've had an opportunity to look at the report, and very important sections of the report are not attached, particularly the views of the stakeholders is very critical of a report of this nature, that we get to know what the stakeholders said about some aspects of the report. So I hope next time we have a bill before us, we want to be told what happened in the committee. Maybe the minutes should be attached, and also the views of the stakeholders. Mr. Speaker, this bill is actually implementing the fourth schedule in relation to village polytechnics and homecraft centers, and that is within our mandate as Senate. And is also a bill that is going to provide the governance framework for the establishment, registration, and accreditation of vocational education and training centers within the counties. So it's a very important bill, and as the mover had alluded to, we have so many driving schools, we have computer colleges, which are privately owned and should actually be regulated under this bill to ensure some uniformity in the standards of training and examinations in this institution. Mr. Speaker, I think the focus in this country has to change. Many people are rushing to do degrees, even those who don't get good scores
at the secondary level. They will find themselves doing bridging courses until they get their way to the university. I think we need to change this attitude so that we have our learners also focusing on important trainings. We have a serious shortage of plumbers in this country. Mr. Speaker, when you have a problem with your plumbing and you want to get one, it is a struggle because most of the people who would learn plumbing are struggling to join universities or colleges to learn what they think is a white-collar training. In our counties, I was surprised to learn that most of our counties, we don't have meat inspectors. A simple thing like that. So you find that some counties have taken people to, I think there is a college somewhere in Taita Taveta there, where people go for meat inspection course. And this is a very basic course that we can do within our counties. But most importantly, Mr. Speaker, this bill is going to enhance employability of our youth and at the same time responds to the needs of our economy. The needs of our economy is that we have people at the lower level there who are hanging and they need to be trained in some of these skills so that they can contribute to our economy. But Mr. Speaker, I wish the mover of the bill can enhance it so that we have 3 levels. We have school-based training, that is vocational training that can be done within our schools. When I was in high school, Mr. Speaker, we had some special courses that we did. Like I remember I did woodwork. Which was basically training us to be carpenters. And I still apply that training to date, Mr. Speaker, even though I ended up being an IT expert. I still remember that. We had things like technical drawing, which I know some of my former colleagues in high school are still applying that, even though they are doing other things. So we need to have school-based programs integrated maybe in this bill. We also need to consider adult learning. That is, even for those who have either gone through formal education or not, can also have access to this kind of training. And post-school arrangement. Because, Mr. Speaker, in Europe, where there is a lot of focus around vocational training, they have 2 levels of this training. They have what we call the initial vocational education and training, which is done within the schools, upper secondary and even post-secondary level. They have what we call continuing vocational education training, which is done post-school, even when someone is working, so that they can acquire new skills or even retrain. So, Mr. Speaker, this is the beginning. I think this bill can be improved to accommodate these different levels of training that I'm talking about. Mr. Speaker, this will also expose the learners to work-based learning and vocational education, even when they are working and doing other things. For example, Mr. Speaker, I would like to know about plumbing so that I don't engage a plumber who will come to my bedroom when I'm not there, Mr. Speaker. So I can fix it myself. You know, some things are too private to be done by other people. So we need to be given these opportunities, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have also looked at the bill, transitional provisions of the bill, where the mover is proposing that those institutions which were established under Basic Education Act, Technical and Vocational Education Training Act, will automatically be licensed under this new law. I would wish that maybe in the committee of the whole house, we can also define the time frame of doing this, because some of these institutions may need to be reevaluated afresh. In the report, Mr. Speaker, it is proposed that we need to have a policy intervention to provide for a framework for inter-county transfers of trainees and instructors. Mr. Speaker, I think this is very important, so that if someone has to change residence or for some reasons he needs to move to another county, it should not be a hindrance. He can go and still continue with the training wherever he's going to. So I hope the mover will note that and make the necessary recommendation in amendments. Mr. Speaker, the issue of TVET, Management Information System, and the linkage to the labor market through the Kenya Labor Management Information System is very important because that should provide a platform where the learners can, the details of the learners can be posted so that employers can have access to those details for easy employability. I also want to commend the
I'm now the timekeeper. I think that your time is over. Your time is over. Just pass your next point to Senator Aminda Kibwana. It's on behalf of Senator Ososi. Senator Ososi, many contributors to this